Hey everybody, Juan here, and it's time to take a look at the video quality on the Nokia Lumia 920. As I'm sure you've read by now, this is quite possibly the most impressive camera module ever built into a phone. An 8-megapixel backside illuminated image sensor is paired with a 26mm Carl Zeiss lens and an f2.0 aperture, and the entire affair boasts optical image stabilization, a first for any smartphone. Starting with a couple shots in good light, you can see the image stabilization start to kick in as I move the camera around. Since it's pretty bright outside, it means the camera's probably shooting with a really fast shutter speed, so it's going to exacerbate all of those jittery, wobbly issues that all smartphone cameras will have with this kind of an exposure. Detail, color, and clarity are all very good, but I do find that the Lumia tends to hunt focus just a little bit more than I'd like. This is a pretty busy scene with all the trees, but I do wish that the focus wasn't quite so busy. I am, however, sincerely impressed with the dynamic range. I'm essentially shooting into the sun at this part right here, and yet you can still see plenty of detail and we haven't blown out the sky completely. We'll talk about that a little bit more with our nighttime shots as well. Now, for our requisite street scene, I had to shoot from a slightly different angle than I usually do to do this test. Unfortunately, that meant there was a huge swath of the video which is in shadow, but again, when we're talking dynamic range, the camera does a great job of keeping detail and shadows without blowing out the sky. Unfortunately, you can also see as cars are driving by throughout this scene, the camera is still a little indecisive as to what to lock focus on. The autofocus is just aggressive enough that busy scenes are going to be a little problematic when you're shooting your own video. Now, we all know of the problems plaguing the 920 with stills photography, where pictures can be a little soft and detail can be a little muted. Included here are just a couple macro shots that I included on the First Impressions video, both of these shot in dim indoor lighting. While photos might lack a little detail, that's not the case with video. And I'm very impressed with the clarity of the image sensor, especially when you get right on top of your subject. Next up is our transition test, moving from a bright scene to a moderate scene to a dim indoor lighting scenario. The camera adjusts exposure very quickly, but it's not a very pleasant adjustment. It seems to be staged, and moving from light to dark to light, you can see there seem to be definite steps of exposure. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not quite as pleasant as the exposure adjustments that you'd see on a phone like the Galaxy S3 or the Galaxy Note 2. But speaking of darker or dimmer shots, this camera is an absolute champ at dim, dark, indoor lighting scenarios, especially when you need to capture action. Seen here is a friend of mine at a recent holiday party showing us that she can juggle. The camera maintains a fluid 30 frames per second, and it's extremely detailed action. At that same party, we had puppies. Who doesn't love puppies? I think we should just watch a little more video of puppies. Come on, come on.
Yeah. Did you see that petition that someone tried?
And this brings me to my final test for the camera, nighttime photography. You remember at the beginning when I was talking about the dynamic range this camera can show off? Well, it's on display large and in charge when you shoot video at night. This camera does a phenomenal job of capturing low-light detail while not completely blowing out highlights from streetlights, signs, and cars driving by. This is phenomenal range for a camera built into the back of a phone. All in all, Nokia has done a fantastic job with the video functions built into this camera. And the few issues this camera might have are handily negated by all of the raw capability on display. I would expect that in the next firmware update, these issues will probably be addressed. But in the meantime, this is still the most formidable camera module I have ever seen built into a phone. Thanks for watching, guys, and you can catch our full review of the Nokia Lumia 920 on yourtechreport.com.